Yo, what's up, guys? Funny thing is, I've already tried it times, and I realized my mic was off. Besides the point. This is gonna be a data store service, and I'm just gonna teach you the basics of data store service. Data store service, basically just a service where you can get a data store, and then you can call a bunch of functions called get async, set async, and update async. We're only gonna get into get async and set async today. And essentially what these functions can do is you provide a key, uh, and you can either set or you can, receive a data from that key. So that's what we're going to try to do today. So first, what you want to do is create a new experience. Make sure your experience settings, go to security. Make sure you have enable studio access to API services. Essentially, what this helps with is just so you can test data stores inside of Studio. It's fine to keep it off as long as you're publishing a game. So I'm gonna create a new script inside of search service called, just name it data store handler. And since we have this, we can basically, let me just set it up. Instead of our services, we're going to have some data store service. Find that as game get service data store service. And then we're gonna have some variables. So one of our variables are gonna be session data. Session data is essentially gonna hold everyone's data that is currently in the game, and this is good for like updating data pretty easily. So, yep. And what we can do is we're going to get a data source called player data. And there's a unique function on data store service called get data store, and you can get a data store that is called whatever you provide here. And now that we have that data store, we can actually start using it. But before we use that, we have to make some functions. So let's just do local function player added. And we can have another function called, let's just say player removing. And inside of these, we're going to receive a player. And for these to work, let's just get the players service. And we're going to do players dot player added, and connect that to our player added function. And then we can do players dot player removing, connect that to our player removing function. And then we're gonna have one more, but I'll explain that to you. Name bind to close function, and I'll set this up later for you. Okay. So for the semi-complicated part of the script, we want to essentially make a p call. So we're going to say success equals a p call like this, and a p call stands for protected call, which basically runs what is ever inside of this function, and it'll do that safely. So what I mean by safely is it won't stop your script if it has an error. If like this function has an error inside of it, then it won't actually stop everything after, which is good. We want that. So now what we can do is we can say, let's actually first create a variable called data. With this data variable, we can set player data to, we can set this data variable to player data get async. And if you remember, I said get async. If you provided a key, it'll try to retrieve it from that data store. And this is something new. If it can't find it, then it will it'll return nil. And we're gonna put that to good use later. So now we can do say key underscore player.userID. To do that, we can now do that's actually all we need for this function, except if you want to do some data store get options. Won't get into today. So what we can say is if success, meaning there has been no errors trying to get the data. Usually this is just we call this because say Roblox Studio data store service API ever goes down. We want to make sure that this player's data isn't like nil, so we don't set their player data to nil, and you'll see that later. So, because we don't want them playing the game with no data, because they're just wasting their time at that. So, we can do warn failed load data for player. I'm not going to specify right now. And then we will return. We're also going to say error by name that this gives off if it doesn't. Remember to change this to not. Alright. And now do let's see. Yeah, we have to kick the player because once again we don't want them just wandering around. So what we can do is failed load your data. Please rejoin. Alright. So that'll kick them if the API is ever down. And now we can say if not data. Or let's just say if data equals no. Then we're gonna do this. So this meaning like they are new to the game. They haven't ever joined. If they never joined, it won't actually error because this will just return nil. And if it did error, this would meaning like the API is down. We have to make a new variable called, let's just call it default data. So this default data will hold whatever data the player should get whenever they join the game. So let's just say they get 100 cash and they get 10 gems. All right. So that's their data whenever they first. What we can do with this is if they just joined, then we can set this data variable to the default. Then let's just say player is new. Giving default data. Okay. Now we can set their toString player.userID. So we're basically creating a new key inside of this table, and we're going to set it to this data. This data could either be their data inside of the player data store or this default data table. Now what we want to do, this is for whenever they leave. So this is actually a little different than the player added. We don't need a data function. A data variable. So we can just do success, comma error equals another p call. Remember, we don't APIs ever down. We don't want it to do some stuff. So now we provided this string up here that we did. Key underscore player.userID. And we set it to the session data that we set over here. So we can set we're just saving whatever their data is inside. And essentially, once we're saving it and once we're trying to load it, if they already have data, it would look like this. So let's just say Roblox, which is has a user ID of 1. That's what their data would look like. It would look something kind of like this. It would look exactly like this. So cash equals 100 and their gems equals. This is what their data would look like. inside of DataStore. That's essentially what. And then we're going to set a key out of the set async, and we're providing a table or an object that is um, it's just a table in this scenario to this key. Now we can do if not success, then we're going to warn say failed to save player data. Error, provide the error. Now, what we're going to do is, in this scenario, we don't want to return, because we still want to remove them from the table, if they ever did exist, like this. And another safety precaution that we want to take is if session data equals nil, then we want to do that. So we're going to return if they have no data, because if we're kicking them, that means they have no session data. So we're essentially, if this wasn't here, we'd just be trying to set their data to nil with this data store, which that is not good because that could erase all their data. Now, what we can do now is actually should be close to working. It's already. So let's just join the game. Okay. Just another thing to keep in mind when we're using data stores is make sure whenever you're trying to set something inside of a data store, make sure it's UTF-8 friendly. Meaning, like, I think that means I don't remember fully, but it can't be like an object. Can't just save an object. You actually have to like create a whole table. Yeah. You can't just do work. Can't just do set async a key workspace.baseplate. At least I don't think you can. I've never really tried it, but I think that's what it means by state friendly. Some things you can. So, actually forgot to print out our data. So, we're going to print out our data. Let's change this to data. So, now, whenever we playtest, should get new data. Yep. Player is new. We're gonna, so it's essentially giving them new default data with, we have 100 cash, 10 gems, which is what we want. And now if we leave the game and rejoin, oh, okay, that's not good. So let's see what I did wrong. So, oh, also make sure to string this, their player user. That actually might have been it. Check that. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there we go. All right. Now it's actually loading properly and saving. So, say we want to change their data every second. Let's add one to their cache every second. So you don't want to do this in a real game, but this is just for case. So we can do while test wait. We can do session data string player.user ID, and we're gonna do .cache, and we're gonna add one to it every second. And we're going to print out session data. We're just gonna print out their data instead. And essentially, with that, it's updating it every second, and we're getting more cache every second. So now we have 102, 104, 105, 6, 7. We leave we should start with 100. Oh, hold on. Let's do it one more time. Fully disconnected. Oh, okay. Now this is where it actually have to do. So whenever you're uh, so in Studio, it actually shuts down instead of doing .player remove. So the blind, you have to use bind close. So bind close is basically a function where if you shut down your experience, this function will run. So inside this function, we're going to do for underscore player and players get players, and for every player, we're just going to essentially call the player removing function on them, just like that. And oh, okay, actually loaded my. All right, now if I leave, it start off with 117. All right, yeah, because I'm gaining more money every second. Fine. Don't mind this. This is just it's because this loop's still running. This is why you never want to infinitely run even. Anyways, um, let's for in this scenario, say I want to give the player the data, like send that data to the client. We're going to create a new function, a remote function inside of replicated storage called data, and we're going to service here called replicated storage, and we're going to get this data remote function. And with this data remote function, we can do data remote function dot on server invoke. And essentially, if the server is being invoked with this remote function, we're just going to automatically assume that they're trying to retrieve the current data. So we can do return session data toString player dot user8. And we're going to create a new client script. I'm going to name it client for people. And we're going to get replicated storage. Like this. We're going to get the data remote function. And we can do local client data. Or let's just do data equals this data remote event and remote function. We're going to invoke the server. Now, since we've done that, we can get this data on player join. So now it should print it out on the client as well. So let's check that. So cache 120, server prints out cache 120. Okay, that's working properly. But now you might be asking, how do we update it every second? Because we're changing their data every second, but the client doesn't even know that. The way to do that is to essentially just do data function dot on client invoke, and we're just gonna assume that whenever we're being invoked on the client, we're retrieving new client data. So inside this function, we're getting new data. We're gonna set client data to that new data, and we're gonna print it out once more. And now on the server, whenever we're updating their data, we're going to do data remote function invoke the client, specify the player, and we're going to send in their data with the new cache. And now, if we do that, the data should also receive a new update as well, saying, yep, there we go. Alright, and that's essentially how games do it. And personally, there is more modules out there called Profile Store, but anyways, I have to go out. I'm running out of time.